A Master of Social Work degree is one of the common paths that people take to becoming a therapist or a counselor in Canada. Not only that, but the vast majority of therapists are social workers with an MSW degree. So today we're going to be talking about how to become a therapist in Canada with an MSW degree. So first, let's talk about what a clinical social worker is. A clinical social worker is focused on providing therapeutic supports in a clinical setting to individuals, families, and groups. Much like a psychotherapist or a psychologist, the primary goal is providing therapy in a face-to-face setting. Now, the one thing that makes social work different from psychotherapy or counseling psychology programs is the fact that social workers always have a strong focus on the bigger picture and social justice. So while the field of psychology might be really focused on individual pathology and the different challenges that people face, a clinical social worker is going to look at the person in the context of their environment, and that's going to really inform their values and their approaches. So if you're considering whether you should apply to Master of Social Work or another similar program such as counseling psychology, think about your own values and your own goals and what is your primary objective in pursuing the career path of becoming a therapist. I think something that I often see are a lot of applicants who are interested in pursuing a Master of Social Work because they realize that it's a quick path to becoming a therapist. And this shows up in their graduate school applications when you can tell that they're not really aligned with the values of the social work profession. So I would really make sure that you are going into social work for the right reasons and that it truly is aligned with your own goals. One example I often see in a graduate school application is somebody will apply to their Master of Social Work from the psychology field. And in their personal statement and in their grad school application, they will talk about how they realized that the field of psychology was not for them because they found that it was too focused on individual pathology, whereas a social work degree looks at the challenges that people are facing and considers the broader perspective at the macro level that contributes to the things that people are going through. Just to clarify, I'm not saying that people in the field of psychology don't do those things. I'm making a broad generalization of what the field of social work focuses on versus what the field of psychology focuses on. So to become a clinical social worker in Canada, you have to register with your province's regulatory body. For example, in the province of Ontario, our regulatory body is the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers. One thing that is very important to note is that in Ontario, we do not have a distinction between someone who practices clinical work versus a regular social worker. What we see in some states is they will have different paths for different types of licensure for people who are interested in becoming a clinical social worker. In addition to that, we actually don't use the term clinical social worker. You might be practicing clinical social work within a role, but our designation is always registered social worker. So that's really important wherever you are applying from, that you understand the titles and designations that you are allowed to use. Something that is also important to consider is that any MSW degree will qualify you to become a social worker who practices therapy. You do not need to attend a clinically focused MSW program in order to become a therapist or a counselor in Canada. Now, that said, there are some caveats to that. There are times when it can be very beneficial to pursue a clinically focused MSW program. I do find that one challenge that we face in Canada is there's often a gap between graduating with your MSW and then breaking into the therapy space. I find a lot of people have to pursue additional trainings. They have to do like unpaid externships. And yeah, they have to get very creative because it's kind of one of those things where you can't get a job without experience and you can't get experience without a job. And because we don't have a clear licensure for people who are interested in clinical work, it's often difficult to get the experience and hours you need to get hired for a job. So, by pursuing a clinically focused MSW program, that can give you some opportunities to get more experience learning about the different therapeutic modalities, getting a placement that is clinically oriented, and then you can use all of that to build on your experience as you work towards becoming a therapist. Personally, I went to a generalist MSW program, so there wasn't like a specific specialization or anything. And we took one course on different therapeutic approaches. And each week we covered a different approach. So 1 week was CBT, 1 week was narrative therapy. And yeah, I definitely did not feel like I had learned, like we had barely scratched the surface in terms of like learning about therapeutic modalities. So what I did, because I knew that I had interests in pursuing clinical work, I was able to get a placement doing therapy in a healthcare setting. And because of that experience, I was able to snowball that and get more experience and eventually land a clinically focused job. So yeah, you definitely don't have to attend a clinically focused program. I will say though, I doubt that if you are attending a non-clinical program, there's probably not a ton of clinically focused placements. What a lot of people do as well is they will take additional trainings. So sometimes their workplace will support them in that. Sometimes they will invest in that themselves. I know there's a few programs in Ontario that offer like a pretty comprehensive CBT program that teaches you all the basics of CBT. And I think the big thing that a lot of regulatory bodies really emphasize is that although there aren't specific requirements for the number of hours you need or how much supervision you need to be very competent before providing like clinical therapeutic practices. So they often say that it's not like a direct route, like post graduation. It's unlikely that you're going to jump right into practicing therapy. For a lot of people, it's going to mean going into the field, getting a different social work role, building on your skills, getting training, getting supervision, and then just continuing to build your competence and confidence in the area of providing counseling or therapy. There are currently 2 schools that offer clinically focused MSW programs if that's the path that you are interested in taking. So the University of Calgary and the University of British Columbia's Okanagan campus both provide clinical programs where you're going to learn a lot more in depth, probably a lot more than I learned in my one class where each week was a different therapeutic modality. And the other thing that's important to know too is that just because you do attend a clinically focused MSW program, it doesn't mean that you are pigeonholing yourself into that specific area. You still qualify for the same jobs that somebody with another MSW degree qualifies for. So really when it comes to specializations and areas of focus, it just helps you better meet your goals and tailor your education to what you're hoping to do in the future. If you are interested in becoming a therapist or a counselor, let us know in the comments. And specifically, if you're interested in pursuing an MSW, let us know why you are choosing that path in particular over another path to becoming a therapist. I'd love to hear more about why you're choosing social work and any other questions that you might have.